Hi folks, welcome to the next edition of Serverless Craic with myself, Dave Anderson. I'm a technical fellow with Bizarre Voice and author and contributor at the Serverless Edge.
Mark McCann, architect at Globalization Partners and author and contributor at Serverless Edge.
Hey everybody, Michael O'Reilly, architect with Globalization Partners and contributor of Serverless Edge. Hello.
We are continuing our series we have the book, The Value Flywheel Effect, which will be out soon, and we've been talking about the value flywheel and really exploring that kind of model. Last time we spoke about the whole model and the whole 4 phases, which are clarity of purpose, challenge and landscape, next best action, and long-term value. We can talk about them at a high level, so we figured we'd maybe deep dive a little bit into clarity of purpose. First phase of the flywheel, clarity of purpose. So we just give a little explanation of what clarity of purpose actually means. What does it mean to you, Mark?
Because it's knowing where you're going, right? It's knowing where you want to go next, what your purpose is, right? It's are the things that you're working on, meaningful, valuable? Do you understand what that is? So I think having a clarity of purpose is critical for future success. You need to know where you're going and why you're going there.
Yeah, remove the coconut headphones, isn't that what you just say? Like, so really understand what are the problems that we're solving and why. All right, so having real clarity into why we doing the work that we're doing, and and being able to kind of anticipate the impact that you're wanting to have.
Yep.
I think it's a huge kind of topic, and believe it or not, I think it's probably a huge challenge for most sort of modern organizations in terms of getting it right.
I think there's a massive need for everyone to understand why they're doing the things that they're doing. Who are your users? What are their needs? What are you doing to meet those needs? This is we talk about this a lot, so we're well practiced in it. But this is the stuff that a lot of people and a lot of teams don't ask themselves.
Yeah, and as well, I think it's what I mean. The phrase rolls off the tongue. So as an engineer, what's your clarity of purpose? Like, it's not go to work. You know what I mean? It's definitely not that. Or is it write code? It's what your company's clarity of purpose. For me, I think there's an onus on the senior leadership by the CEO to make sure this is understood. Purpose being what are the business going after, and clarity being, are you very specific on that? Is it measurable? So there's a lot in that phrase. So why do you think it's important? There's a question for you.
It's important for a number of reasons, right? So I think, like, for me, one of the hardest things in sort of modern software delivery and modern kind of digital orgs is prioritization. We already kind of talked about there, how do we know we're working on the right thing, but how do we understand the current picture and making sure that we're making the right decisions with regards to the approaches and things that we're taking. So, like, if we don't have the clarity of purpose and we don't understand what problem we're solving or what our users' needs are, then we can't really make good decisions with regards the work that we carry out, or where we invest our time or resources in terms of meeting those needs. What you'll find is if you don't have it, that becomes very, very difficult. You almost begin to guess, and that's a wee bit of a
I think that
problem.
alignment's critical. It's you want autonomous teams, you want high performing autonomous teams, but if they're not aligned behind a clarity of purpose, then they'll all go off in 5 different directions, and they won't actually have the impact you think they should have for your organization. So it's critical that clarity of purpose is understood and clearly articulated at all levels, from the top to the bottom.
So you've got prioritization, right, for decision making, because you don't have infinite capacity. That's a good one. Alignment, make sure people are of the same mindset. I also think of it as an anchor when you're doing things. The 2 things I always thought were funny is innovation without clarity of purpose is just making shit up, because it doesn't really matter what you do. You know what I mean? Whatever, innovation. And then execution without clarity of purpose is just busy work. You know, you're just going, so you don't know when you're done. So I always think it's really important to be clear what the outcome is before you start either ideate and think outside the box, or before you kind of hit it.
And I think from a personal point of view, from each individual person on those teams, it gives their work more meaning.
Yeah.
Because it gives them a much more purposeful existence. It makes their, we're all suffering from sort of digital fatigue and burnout and all the sort of people moving jobs. If they have clarity of purpose, if they know the things that they're doing is meaningful and having an impact, that makes them happier.
Would you say as well, that's a key ingredient of being able to pivot? Like what you find in some companies is that they'll build something because someone else built something, and they, that the whole sunken cost fallacy kicks in, and because they have no clarity of purpose and they can't really measure success appropriately, then they tend to kind of invest in something that's already failed. So kind of knowing when to stop and when to try the next thing is really another kind of core rationale for a good solid clarity on your purpose.
I think having good situational awareness is critical around this as well, and having the data to back up your purpose, having those key metrics and those key input metrics that you're driving towards is critical as well. You want to make sure that the things you're doing are actually influencing the right metrics, right, and all aligned to your purpose. Yeah,
because you're an IT person, you can come up with a million good ideas, a million good things you could be doing. But you've got to be prepared to say, well, actually, no, this is not going to have any impact, or this is not really going to affect the bottom line. This is not really going to manifest itself in any sort of benefit for what we're trying to do there in relation to your North Star, or your overall goal.
And there's two things there we talked about, like, having the data. Having the data means you can actually define a North Star and be very data driven about that. We talk about North Star as a technique to structure your data so you're very clear on what that goal is, and then measuring time to value as a way of, if you're trying to build something, you need to be clear what the value is and how long it takes you to actually unlock that. So there are specific techniques that we've talked about that help you with clarity of purpose. What happens if you ignore it? It's definitely not a default or mandatory. You don't have to get into it. I remember famously being asked once, stop talking about why we're doing stuff and just do it, which wasn't healthy.
I think you've answered your own question there. The organizations then don't become healthy. They don't become places that people want to actually have an impact. They'll turn up and they'll clock in the hours, but they won't actually move the org forward. They won't move their team forward. They won't move themselves forward.
Lack of engagement.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, and you've seen it. I've seen it before where, teams begin to solve the same problems, because there's lack of collaboration. People aren't communicating effectively. It becomes really difficult to kind of prioritize and organize across teams as well, which is another side effect of it. But again, we talked about it earlier in the call. You start to guess at things, and we just build stuff out for the sake of building, and we're not really focused on the overall kind of outcome
and I guess as engineers, we love nothing more than building cool, shiny stuff. And if you don't have that purpose, if you don't have that understanding, you will continue to build cool, shiny stuff without any real valuable impact to the org.
But to your point earlier, Dave, like from an innovation perspective, I mean, do you not think if you don't, how can you innovate? How can an organization be innovative if it's not clear on its purpose or its overall mission? It's impossible.
I don't think you can. I mean, you talked about innovation theater. All the execs all of a sudden start wearing sandals and sports jackets with open ties. That's not innovation. You know what I mean? Or rock up a chatbot. You know what I mean? So that's all kind of innovation theater. We'll start putting stickies on the wall instead of using documents. That's all the traps you see people fall into around innovation. Another one is the build trap, that you've teams building like Billio, and nobody knows why they're building what they're building, but they just know it has to be ready by Friday. And then you have with what we call the gold plating, you get into this kind of big ball of mud where the engineers have just went crazy building, and you have this really complicated system. Let's get duplication and complexity, and then all of a sudden you need a simplification program because it's too complicated, or you need a reuse program because you've built the same thing 4 or 5 times. So there's a lot of these are common traps, and funny enough, you do see them with really big companies who have scaled like crazy. Lots of big companies. It's actually even in the big tech companies that you think would be organized, they've got the same thing umpteen different times.
Yeah, and there's a lot of agile data. You know, you have all the metrics and all these data points, but you're not actually making an impact because you're not aligned to the vision. You're not you don't have a clarity of purpose.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I always think startups are usually very good at clarity of purpose. Well, the ones that survive are. The ones that don't survive probably have a bad clarity of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the final answer on this one is, you know, what happens if you don't have clarity of purpose? Well, over time, you'll just go out of existence.
Yeah, inertia is probably the word, isn't it?
Yeah, inertia. So that's the crack. That's phase one of our flywheel, clarity of purpose. Much more in the book, and we'll hit phase two, which is challenge next time. Please have a look at the Twitter on @ServerlessAge and on YouTube and on the blog at serverlessage.com. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.